More news at the bottom of the hour. Stay tuned now for the O'Reilly Factor right here on the Fox News Channel.
Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thank you for watching us tonight. The real story about the war in the Middle East, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Pull up a chair and listen to this. Secretary of State Colin Powell will meet with Ariel Sharon, and Israel will begin pulling back its forces. That's my prediction. This whole Powell visit has been a secretly orchestrated dance. The Bush administration knows that Israel is fighting terrorism, and it agrees with that fight. So Sharon is being given some extra time to capture as many terrorists as he can and inflict punishment on the Palestinians so they will remember that there is a price to be paid for supporting terrorists. This military strategy is as old as civilization. The Roman legions used it, the northern armies used it in the Civil War, the Axis powers used it in World War II. The message is simple. For every one of ours that you kill, you lose 10 or 20 or 100. That is the brutal truth of what is going on here. Israel is totally dependent on America, so it will have to stop its military offensive soon or risk the loss of money and equipment that we provide, and we provide billions. While it is true that Israel is fighting terrorism, the collateral damage on the Palestinian civilian side is tremendous. In effect, Israel is fighting terror with terror. The ethical problem here is that Israel does not seem to have much choice but to inflict pain on the Palestinians. There is no question that their leadership encourages attacks on Israeli civilians, no question about that, and the population seems to support that choice. So President Bush is giving Sharon some room to make his point and perhaps protect his people. But soon Sharon will have to order a pullback so as not to embarrass Bush and America. Americans themselves must make a mistake. They do make a mistake if they take rigid sides in this fight. Both the Palestinians and the Israelis have done wrong. There is no black and white in this situation. I believe that Israel is the more reasonable of the two sides and the more moral. But the Israelis can be brutal and unfair. They see this as a fight for their survival, and that mindset justifies a lot of carnage. In the end, the USA will continue backing Israel as the Arab world has become increasingly irrational and anti-American. Fundamentalist Muslims have power, and they are our enemies, as well as the enemies of Israel. So we have common ground with the Israelis, and that is the reason we tilt in their direction. But make no mistake about it, both sides have caused this war, and it will take both sides to end it. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight, protests and violence on some college campuses in the USA over the war in the Middle East. The University of Michigan and the University of California are perhaps the most intense situations as pro-Palestinian demonstrators have angered and frightened some Jewish students on campus. There is passion on both sides, of course, but is there reason? Let's find out. Joining us now from Ann Arbor, Michigan, is Eric Buckstein, a junior at the University of Michigan, and chairman of Hillel, a group that promotes Jewish life. And from San Francisco, Leila Katami, a member of the General Union of Palestinian Students and a sophomore at San Francisco State University. Mr. Buckstein, let's go to you first. Is there fear among the Jewish students at the University of Michigan?
To a certain extent. I think at the university, we have a system of fair play when it comes to activism, for the most part, where both sides are certainly, any side is able to represent their viewpoint. However, I think there's a fundamental difference between the Jewish pro-Israel students and a lot of the pro-Palestinian Arab students. Many Jewish students feel it's their job to be pro-Israel, in that they're not anti-Israel. You see what I'm saying?
They're not anti-Palestinian, you mean?
Exactly.
Okay, so they're pro-Israel.
On the other side, exactly. And on the other side, I get the feeling that it's not necessarily pro-Palestinian. While that might be part of it, it's anti-Israel. And with that comes a lot of intimidation towards Jewish students.
Have you seen it yourself? Have you been intimidated at all?
Personally, not so much, but I do know people that have had threats. I do know people that have had rocks thrown at them.
On the campus? On the University of Michigan campus?
Yes.
Really?
I don't think it's... it's not widespread. I don't know if Jewish students walk around here scared for their lives, but there is a certain level of intimidation. And I think with any intimidation, it's what's underlying that intimidation which is really the problem.
All right. Let me get out to San Francisco. Ms. Katami, what do you feel about this? You participated in some of these demonstrations. Do Jewish students have a right to be fearful?
Right. No, they do not. These claims of intimidation are, in my eyes, ridiculous. They are trying to veer off the course of what the pro-Palestinian students are aiming for, and that is the growing solidarity movement among campuses throughout the USA and worldwide, which is basically saying, stop our tuition, stop our tax dollars going to Israel. $10 million a day of our U.S. tax dollars are going to Israel. It's unacceptable by every American, not just pro-Palestinian supporters. Every American should be upset about this.
Why, Ms. Khatami? I mean, here's my rationale. If America didn't send this money to Israel, the Arabs would kill all the Jews and wipe them out.
No, Israel has the strongest military army.
Yeah, why do you think they have the strongest military? Because we give them
America
the money.
America chose to support them.
Yeah.
Granted.
And if we didn't, the 200 million Arabs in the world would wipe out the Jews, would they not? They'd kill them.
No. I think we're misconstruing what we're aiming for here. We're aiming for two independent states living next to each other. Israel is perpetuating a campaign of terror against the Palestinians within the past couple weeks.
That might be what you're aiming for, Ms. Khatami, but is Hamas aiming for that? I don't believe they are. I believe they're aiming for the destruction, the total destruction of Israel.
Listen, when we're looking at, killing is not justifiable on any side. But we need to make the distinction in American media and throughout the world between the oppressor and the oppressed. Without the occupation, violence would be a lot less common because Palestinians would have the right to freedom, the right to self-determination, the right to an independent Palestinian states. The civil liberties we take for granted in this country would be granted to them.
But now, are you justifying suicide bombings against civilians because you don't believe the Israelis are behaving properly?
Never, never.
Well, that's what's ignited this war. That's what's ignited the current war.
No, it's not. If we look at the chronology of events, the Intifada started because Sharon visited Al-Aqsa Intifada, Al-Aqsa Mosque, inciting, basically provoking the Palestinians. That's what
But how did they provoke them?
If you look at the chronology of events, when they're sending in tanks and troops into occupied territory.
But why are they doing that? They're doing that because suicide bombers are killing their civilians, and they're looking for the people who do that. Come on.
They're not doing that. If they want to, if they're going to fight, if they want to fight what they call terrorism, they should not take that approach.
Well, what approach would you take?
You're only inciting hatred when you're doing that.
Of course you are. But you have to wipe out the people who are killing you. All right, let's get back to you, Mr. Buxton. I'll come back.
Their campaign is not wiping out terrorists. It's wiping out innocent civilians. They're not targeting terrorists.
It's wiping out both. Unfortunately, it's hurting both. Mr. Buxton, now look, this is the crux of the matter, and Ms. Khatami feels very passionately and strongly about it, that Israel has this overwhelming might that they're using indiscriminately against Palestinian civilians. How do you answer that?
Well, I think it's easy to answer that. Like I said, especially on campus, and I can't speak to the facts. I can't speak to the facts on the ground, but not effectively because I'm not an expert. I don't know if my peer in San Francisco is an expert. I doubt it. But what I can speak to is what goes on campus. And like I said, I just want to reiterate that we're not trying to quell Palestinian national aspirations. Our message is compromise, don't terrorize. Our compromise is, we want peace. Just stop the terror. We don't want to be afraid to go to cafes, to restaurants, that kind of a thing. And that's the pro-Israel message. And there's a fundamental asymmetry there between the Arab students and their message and our message.
We got it. And we thank you very much, both of you, for helping us out tonight. Next on the rundown, these could be the last days. At Cardinal Law stays in office. The pressure on him to resign is enormous. Right back with that report. Time now for the most ridiculous item of the day. The Federal Aviation Administration is a disaster, in my opinion. That agency allowed the skies to become dangerously crowded in the late 90s, oversaw the lax security at the airports that aided the terrorists, and is generally full of apathetic and incompetent boobs. Not everybody, but a lot of them. Hey, this is a no-spin zone. Anyway, last month, the FAA mailed out a newsletter featuring an editorial calling for the 9/11 terrorists to be brought to justice. Wow, groundbreaking analysis, and we paid for it. Problem is, they sent the newsletter to Zaid Samir Jarrah, one of the dead hijackers. A spokesperson for the FAA says she doesn't know how that happened, but we do. The FAA is ridiculous. Finally, tonight, the mail. A lot of partisan missives last night, especially about our interview with Benjamin Netanyahu. James Berkhamer, Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Bill, what makes you more qualified to formulate Israel's military strategy than the former prime minister? The arrogance of the media is astounding. By your yardstick, then, Mr. Berkhamer, no head of state could ever be challenged. Come on. Josh Wooden, Holman, Wisconsin. Bill, thank you for confronting Netanyahu on Israel's attacks on civilians in response to terrorism. I found his response to be lacking. Julie Monroe, Louisville, Kentucky. Netanyahu is right on the money. You can't make any exceptions with terrorism. Doesn't the fact that we are calling for the Israelis to pull back make us hypocrites? No, it makes us peacemakers, Ms. Monroe. The situation is a clash between two parties, both of whom have legitimate grievances. It has been thrown out of whack by the Palestinians embracing terrorism. If they back off from that, negotiations are possible. If they don't, the Israelis can always go back in. Corinna Bell, Millington, Tennessee. Netanyahu is a nationalist as defined by George Orwell. The nationalist not only does not disapprove of atrocities committed by his own side, but he has a remarkable capacity for not even hearing about them. Ryan Stickle, Stoutsville, Ohio. O'Reilly, your segment with Netanyahu is exactly the kind of well-informed give and take on an issue that I have come to expect from the Factor. Well, I appreciate that, Ryan. About our report on the pop stars who did not promote the CD for the 9/11 families. Jajeen Korth, Bondul, Wisconsin. Bill, you are so offbeat. Good line. You should be giving credit to the artists who performed on the CD. Bon Jovi did promote it on their website. Jamie Jones, Caribou, Maine. O'Reilly, I agree that the artist should have helped promote the CD, but when you call and ask for comments, I believe many of them didn't even know it. Their publicist simply said no comment for them. Well, Jamie, that might be true, but it's no excuse. A person's responsible for the people he or she hires. The marching order should be the artist should know about all inquiries. Phil Sparks, Beaver Creek, Ohio. Bill, come on. $9 million is better than nothing. The artist should be praised. By the way, how much did you give to the 9/11 families? You know, that's a cheap shot, and it's not relevant, Mr. Sparks. I'm not going to answer those kinds of questions because that question is used by charlatans all over the world to justify poor behavior. How can you report on drugs if you're not a drug addict? How can you say this if you've never been in the military? Come on, it's a bogus issue. Get it? The artist should have promoted the CD, period. Lisa Foley, Auburn, Washington. I didn't even know there was a tribute to the Hero CD out. That should have been #1 on Christmas gifts last year. Laura Carberg, Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm 16 and never heard of the CD. Jeannie Matthews, Lakeland, Florida. O'Reilly, why can't you leave Hillary Clinton alone? Like all other Republican men, you are both scared and jealous of her. Well, I am scared of her, Miss Matthews. I am not a big fan of socialism. But I am a big fan of the website, www.foxnews.com/O'Reilly. Brand new column for WorldNetDaily.com about the true intent of the military action in the Middle East. So you might want to check that out. Also, how about emailing us with some pithy comments? O'Reilly@foxnews.com, O'Reilly@foxnews.com. All right, that's it for us today. Tomorrow we'll be reporting from Houston, Texas. As always, we thank you for watching The Factor. I'm Bill O'Reilly. We hope to see you again next time. And remember, the spin stops here.